Too big, just sit on it, the rancher said calmly, right before she realized what was under her. Jeb Callahan had worked the high plains long enough to know that trouble never arrived shouting. It arrived quietly, like the moment he found a young Apache woman collapsed near his horse corral. Her breathing, shallow, and her dress, soft, buckskin with short fringes, torn as if she had run through thorns and thickets for miles. Jeb lifted her gently, carried her into his cabin, and waited by her side as she woke with panic flashing in her dark eyes, the kind of panic that came from being chased. She tried to push herself up, murmuring in Apache, struggling to escape, but Jeb held his palms open and nodded slowly, showing he meant no harm. She told him her name was Naya, and though her voice trembled, she explained in pieces that a group of outlaws had raided her people's temporary camp, taking everything they could carry, including something sacred. Jeb didn't ask what it was. He could see enough fear behind her words to know it mattered. He gave her water, a piece of bread, and a blanket, but Naya refused to stay inside. She kept glancing toward the fields, toward the distant country beyond the ranch fences, as though shadows still chased her across the grass. When she finally gathered enough strength to walk, she moved outside with Jeb following close, not wanting her to collapse again. She wandered near the hay bales and barn, touching things cautiously, taking in this strange, quiet place where she had awakened. Jeb tried to keep things calm, but Naya had a fierce spirit. Her small frame carried the weight of someone who had survived too much in one night. She stepped onto a low cart near a haystack to look around, and as she did, she misstepped, losing her balance and falling backward onto Jeb, who stumbled and dropped onto a stack of hay, landing seated while she ended up on his lap, stunned. Naya froze, her breath catching, and Jeb didn't move, afraid she might jump up and collapse again. "Easy," he muttered, keeping his hands down so she wouldn't think he was trying to restrain her. She shifted, trying to stand, but her knee pressed onto the small wooden box Jeb had forgotten he'd set behind him earlier. The moment she sat upright again, the box nudged upward beneath her, making her jerk in shock, her eyes widening and her mouth falling open, exactly like someone who had just realized they were sitting on something unexpected. Jeb, wincing because the box had slammed into his ribs, muttered through tight teeth, "It's just a box, just sit a second." But his voice strained with the pain burning across his side. Naya's surprise turned into alarm as she lifted herself enough to see the edge of the object she had unknowingly sat on, and she gasped, not because it was dangerous, but because she had been so tense already that even the smallest jolt felt like another attack coming. For a moment, her instinct said flee, but Jeb's pained expression stopped her. She could see he was hurting, not threatening her. She slid off him quickly, landing on the ground and bracing the hay bale with one hand. Jeb pressed a palm against his ribs, wincing again. "I ain't trying to scare you," he said. "I just need a second to breathe." She nodded once, then looked at the box again. A new fear crossed her eyes, not for herself, but for what she needed to retrieve. "They took something like this," she whispered, pointing at it. Jeb blinked. "A box?" But Naya shook her head. "Not one, the one. It holds the words of my people." Jeb didn't understand. Not fully, but he knew enough to recognize sacred things when people talked about them with that kind of trembling reverence. He stood slowly, ignoring the throbbing in his side, and said, "If someone stole something important to you, I can help." Naya didn't answer right away. She studied him carefully, weighing every small detail, the pain on his face, the rough calluses on his hands, the calm steadiness in his voice even though her sudden fall had clearly hurt him. Slowly she nodded. He motioned toward the horses grazing near the corral. "You tell me where they went." "We'll ride." Naya hesitated. She was alone, wounded, hunted, and now depending on a rancher she had met only an hour earlier. But she knew one thing for certain. She could not recover the sacred item alone. And Jeb, despite the awkward tumble and the painful expression still etched on his face, had shown no harm, only patience. Taking a breath, she stepped toward the horses and said, "They went north." Jeb grabbed a saddle, tightened his belt, and prepared to ride. But before they left, he picked up the same little box she had sat on earlier, holding it out to her. "Don't worry," he said softly. "Whatever they took, we'll bring it back." And, for the first time since she had awakened on his ranch, Naya allowed herself to hope. Jeb and Naya rode north with the urgency of people who understood. Time was no longer on their side, pushing through open valleys and narrow draws until the trail grew faint, scattered with hoof prints that told the story of men moving fast and burdened with stolen goods. Naya held the reins tightly, sitting straight despite her exhaustion, her short buckskin dress brushing lightly against the saddle horn, her eyes searching the terrain with the quiet intensity of someone raised to read the land like a living map. Jeb watched her out of the corner of his eye, impressed by the way she seemed to sense direction without needing markers. And though the pain in his ribs from the hay bale mishap still throbbed, he kept his discomfort silent so she wouldn't worry. When the sun angled low, they spotted smoke rising from a grove of twisted pines, and Naya stiffened, whispering, "Them." Jeb nodded and guided his horse behind a ridge where they could look down into a crude outlaw camp. 3 men lounged around a fire, their saddlebags scattered around them, and among those bags sat a wooden chest, larger and older than any everyday item. Naya's breath caught when she saw it. Even from a distance, she recognized the carvings etched into its sides, symbols passed from generation to generation. Jeb studied the men, gauging their weapons and positions, then asked quietly, "You trust me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." That single word told Jeb everything he needed. He handed her his spare revolver, not because he expected her to use it recklessly, but because he respected her right to defend what was hers. They moved silently, slipping between rocks and brush until they were close enough to hear the outlaws arguing about who should get the biggest share from selling the stolen goods. As soon as one of them wandered off to check the horses, Jeb and Naya made their move. Jeb lunged from behind a log, grappling one man to the ground, while Naya darted toward the chest. But the third outlaw saw her and grabbed her arm, snarling something cruel as he yanked her backward. She twisted sharply, the same fierce reflex that had carried her out of danger before, and struck him square in the jaw with the revolver's grip. The man fell, stunned. Jeb finished wrestling down the first outlaw and spun toward the last one, who had drawn his pistol. Jeb lunged, taking a blow to the ribs that nearly dropped him again, the same tender spot from when Naya had fallen on him during the haystack mishap, but he pushed through it, knocking the gun away and pinning the man with sheer determination. Once the struggle ended and the men were tied, Naya knelt beside the sacred chest, pressing her hands against the carved surface as if greeting an old friend. She whispered something in Apache, a soft phrase Jeb didn't understand but felt the weight of nonetheless. When she opened the lid, she took out a single wrapped bundle, old papers, symbols drawn in ink made from plants her people had used for centuries. "These are stories," she murmured. "Stories written before I was born. They are all that is left of one family line." Jeb let his breath out slowly. "Then it's a good thing we found them." They loaded the chest and rode back toward the ranch, moving slower this time since both were bruised and tired, but neither dared stop until the ridge and fences of Jeb's home came into view. As they arrived, Naya dismounted and stood for a long moment beside the hay bale where the awkward tumble had happened earlier. She looked at Jeb with a faint, almost teasing spark in her eyes. "You said just sit on it," she said. Jeb rubbed the tender spot on his ribs, giving a half smile. "Didn't think it'd nearly break me." They shared a quiet laugh, light, easing the weight of everything that had happened. In that moment, Naya realized something unexpected. Safety was not only found among her people. Sometimes it appeared in unlikely places, in the form of a weary rancher with kind eyes and a pained grin. Jeb knew it too. He wasn't sure how long she would stay or what the future held, but he understood one thing clearly: he would ride with her again if she ever needed him. As the sun lowered behind the hills, Naya placed the sacred bundle beside the little wooden box she had once sat on by accident, as if pairing the memory of panic with the memory of rescue. And for the first time since the raid, she felt something stronger than fear settling inside her. She felt home beginning to return.